just like you can't undervalue the importance of like constantly be trying new things and new ventures and not throwing away the old thing that did work. Like even when I was starting getting in the foreclosure business, or even when we were starting the real estate brokerage, like we never stopped doing the old things that worked. You just kept looking for something that was a little bit better, that suited you a little bit better. And then, it's the old kind of seat on the bus. And then as something starts to work, you start looking at it and saying, okay, what parts of this role or this business can I now give to somebody else? What's the thing that only I can do right now? And just kind of constantly be giving them. So it's the same thing when you're at the very beginning of your business. It's what can I find that fits just me, or what can I find that maybe I'm a little bit better at naturally, or for me it was just what's something that was more tolerable.
Hey, welcome listeners. Today I have the distinct privilege and honor of introducing a great friend and just terrific business leader here in the Hampton Roads area, Jonathan Melvin. Jonathan is a broker owner of Own Real Estate. He's been licensed since 2005. He and his team has sold over 3,000 homes by combining industry-leading systems and processes and old-fashioned customer service in the industry. So, Jonathan, welcome to the show today.
Hey man, it's good to be on here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I know it's hard to get our schedules to mesh, so thanks for finding the time.
Heck yeah.
And I know we talked before you got on. You just got back from out of town, late night, and no
Yep.
sleep. So I really
Yep.
appreciate it.
You learn to deal with lack of sleep the longer you're in business and the more kids you have. So I'm not sure which one prepares you for which one better, but it seems to
Right.
be a good feedback loop.
Well, one day when all your kids are out, right, and they're off to college doing their own thing, you might be able to sleep, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know what I'll do with myself then.
Yeah, no doubt. So, real quick, give us a little sort of background. You've obviously been really successful in real estate. I know you have multiple companies and things like that, but you got your start, as we said in the introduction, around 2005 in real estate. So, what led you there, and kind of what's been your experience in that whole process?
Yeah, so I got into real estate sort of backwards. My dad had taken one of those like kind of weekend real estate seminars. He got really hyped up, as those things kind of go. He brought me into it. The numbers seemed like, hey, if this works, this could be a really pretty good gig. So we tried to flip houses for a few years. We were not very good at it, partly because they were selling seminars, not actually teaching people how to flip houses. So we got into it on that. Through that process, I got licensed thinking like, hey, back then commissions were about 3.5%. And so I thought like, hey, if I keep 3.5%, I'll probably double our profit margin. So this seems like a great move for us. So I got into the business purely for that reason, kind of to sell our investment properties. And then kind of realized over time, being an agents got paid every single deal. Now they didn't make as much money as the investor, but they didn't have the risk. They didn't lose money. And so at that time, I think I had a couple of kids, and the idea of consistency and, hitting a bunch of singles and maybe a double every now and then was way more appealing than hitting home runs every single time. Fast forward a few more years, real estate's very much sales, customer service kind of personality business. And I just didn't quite have the mentorship and leadership to teach me the business correctly, and didn't naturally have sort of the temperament or patience to be a really great real estate agent. So I started looking for something in the realm that kind of met my skill set a little bit better. Very fortunately, met some people that had gotten into the foreclosure industry in 2005. And so in 2007, started selling foreclosures, sold foreclosures for, well, I mean, through today, but over that course, sold about 3,000 houses, personally with my team. And then spinning off of that business, decided to make a general real estate company where now we have probably about 110 agents at the time that we're recording this.
Wow. Okay, so interesting. So you got involved with your dad, and you went to the make money overnight with nobody's money, but
Yep.
none of your own money,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Real
exactly.
estate.
Exactly.
Who was that
Nothing
guy?
down real estate.
Yeah, nothing down. There was a guy that was really world famous in selling those seminars and whatnot. But What a serendipity, though, I guess, right? That was the door you walked through, but it wasn't ultimately what you did,
Right.
and you were able to come up with what worked for you. And that's interesting. You said something there that really kind of flagged my attention, and that was, in the real estate business, you felt like your skill set wasn't sort of aligning with what the traditional sort of requirements of that industry were, and so you made a pivot there. Expand on that a little bit. Help me to understand what was going on there, and what gave you the I don't know, maybe the courage to kind of make that pivot instead of just trying to grind through and kind of fit yourself into that mold.
Yeah. So I think it was sort of the benefit of actually not having great mentors back then is that I didn't have sort of an archetype to look at to model, but I knew the business as a whole really did check my big check boxes. The financial models made a lot of sense. The scalability made a lot of sense. I like the industry, and so I started, instead of throwing the whole thing out and going back to zero. It was, it wasn't that real estate was the wrong fit. It was that I needed to find something that was just more uniquely suited to me, and so just kind of kept putting irons in the fire. And it sounds like this very linear, like all stories do. They sound very, very linear. Like I did this thing and then this thing happened, so I stopped doing everything before that and did this. But that idea of kind of constantly be looking for refinement or new opportunity is what sort of moved me to the foreclosure space, which then it was after getting into the space I realized my skill set fit, not before. And so, what had led to that was trying to do real estate investing in a brand new area and met some people just through that. And so I don't think you can undervalue the importance of relationships, just like you can't undervalue the importance of like constantly be trying new things and new ventures and not throwing away the old thing that did work. Like even when I was starting getting in the foreclosure business, or even when we were starting the real estate brokerage, like we never stopped doing the old things that worked. You just kept looking for something that was a little bit better, that suited you a little bit better. And then it's the old kind of seat on the bus. And then as something starts to work, you start looking at it and saying, okay, what parts of this role or this business can I now give to somebody else? What's the thing that only I can do right now? And just kind of constantly be giving away. So it's the same thing when you're at the very beginning of your business. It's what can I find that fits just me, or what can I find that maybe I'm a little bit better at naturally, or for me it was just what's something that was more tolerable. The idea of, back then you had to print off MapQuest paper and people got in the backseat of your car, and I was just constantly lost and frustrated. So that was really the inflection point, was like, wow, this is just very uncomfortable for me. I don't like doing this all day. I will do it. I kept doing it for a long, long time. But that was sort of the, burr under the saddle. That was like, all right, there's got to be something better.
That is so awesome. Yeah, this whole idea of, I mean, there's a lot of really gold points in there. I mean, seeking, you didn't just drop what you were doing to go, jump from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, like the next hot idea. It sounded like you had your core and it
Mm-hmm.
was working. You were grinding it out and you were doing okay, but you knew in your heart of hearts that this wasn't what you want to do ultimately, but you did the smart thing, I think, by as entrepreneurs do, right? You're creating, turning lead into gold. You're taking this idea and then finding someone who can execute some of the tasks and duties that you didn't want to do for whatever reason. Let them do it, help them, train them, right? And make
Mm-hmm.
sure you lead them. So then you can move on to this next thing while you're continuing to look for new and better opportunities to upgrade yourself, I guess, right? Towards some
Yeah.
sort of vision that you're trying to pursue.
Yeah, very much so. And I think too, at the beginning, most young entrepreneurs, they're like, if I was a new entrepreneur and I heard that, I would say like, oh, well, I don't have anybody that I could delegate some of the things I don't like to. Well, guess what? If you're new at this, you have free time. So work 2 40-hour-a-week jobs. You're just your own employee, and go work the job that you don't like. Go work the job that you hope works. And over time, hopefully that sort of gradient shifts. And then later on, giving the responsibilities away becomes its own unique challenge, just like at the beginning, not having anybody to give it to. So it's constantly a learning process.
I heard someone say it was Kevin. I think it was Kevin O'Leary on the Shark Tank. He said was asked how do you become a billionaire. He said, well, you keep it pretty simple. You go out and you make some sales and you make a little money, and you use some of that money and you reinvest it. You find somebody to do some of the things that were not your most effective things. Then you go out and get a few more sales,
Hmm.
and then you use that money to hire somebody else, right? And
Yep.
then so you're gradually kind of moving yourself up a little bit over time. It's not like a leap, but it's just small sort of incremental steps along the way. And it sounds like you're backfilling sort of your enterprise, right, as you grow.
Hmm.
And you probably, I'm guessing that when you first, started in the foreclosure business, you didn't have this vision initially of, hey, I'm going to have this brokerage with 110 agents, as of today, and whatever your goals are in the next year or two. I'm sure you're going to grow, and other businesses. I mean, would that have been intimidating, you think, back then where you were, thinking about all the things you deal with? I mean, did you have to grow into that?
Oh, very much so. And I think it's that same concept of uh, being really faithful right where you are. That you do sort of have these pulls, and you do have this sort of, you know, everybody will use different words. Some people say drive, some people, I'm not a big fan of like the whole hustle culture, but there's that force that sort of pulls you, that makes you dissatisfied with the good job, that makes you dissatisfied with, hey, I was an okay real estate agent, but there's some other things like I really don't like doing that. Or even in the foreclosure space, it was like there's a lot more to this industry. There's a lot more that I could be doing, um, and that idea that if I want to do more, I have to be better at the things I'm doing. That it isn't a everybody's kind of looking for that quantum leap, the giant jump. That's you go from 0 to 10. I didn't know that Kevin O'Leary quote about how do you make $1 billion, but what I thought he was going to say was $1 million at a time,
Yeah.
because that is kind of how it all is. And so when I look through my career, even in the foreclosure space, a lot of that's they're heavily distressed properties. You need to figure out, does it make sense to fix it up? How much is it going to cost to fix it up? Things like that. The skill set that I brought into that industry came out of being a failed uh, investor. That we were not very good
Mm.
investors, and because I wasn't a good investor, I knew exactly how thick the plywood needed to be and how much a sheet of plywood was going for, and which of the three hardware stores in towns had the cheapest tile. And I knew all of that, so that when I was then going to price a house, for some bank in California, it was very, very easy just to walk through and write up the numbers and be way more accurate than everybody else. And it was that skill set that prepared me for the foreclosure business. Foreclosure business prepared me to teach sort of volume real estate. If you're selling 50 houses a month, it's pretty easy to go tell somebody how to sell 50 in a year, because it's the same formula, just spread out a little bit. And then my frustrations of being a real estate agent and not having great mentorship, and kind of feeling alone and lost, really were the seeds of what made this real estate company better and more special. Was that it's heavily skewed towards mentorship and experience and community, versus I think a lot of real estate agents, because they're independent contractors, often feel like they're on an island. And so that was, you kind of look at, hey, I'm being really faithful where I'm planted with the thing. There's something about this that isn't ideal, or that I'm called for more, or there's a part of this job that I hate. None of those are necessarily good or bad. They're just things that drive you forward. And it's this very slow progress. Sometimes a lot of the progress is lateral. To your question about like, did I ever want 100 agents? Like, actively, no. One of the guys that's our longest real estate agent, he's worked with us for 15 years probably at this point. Um, when he wanted to join me originally, I told him no and sent him to another company for a year because I didn't want to deal with real estate agents. And now it's sort of the most rewarding part of my business, and the thing I'm most passionate about. And a lot of the reason for that is it's the area where I have the most to grow. And so a lot of the old lessons I've learned, I can apply, and they're really beneficial to other people, but it's still sort of the great unknown. And it's okay, I have to grow in a bunch of areas. I have to grow in a bunch of skill sets. And for me to do that, other people have to take away some of my day-to-day roles. If there's something that someone else can do, I need to delegate that and give that away. One, because it's good business, but two, I have to create the capacity and margin so that I can go learn and grow, so that I can be the person that the organization needs me to be.
So as the great John Maxwell has written many books, and one of his famous things was the law of the lid, right? So what you're talking about is you as the leader the organization is never going to go larger or grow larger than you as the leader. And so
Mm.
you're giving yourself white space capacity to grow and do the higher level things so that your organization can follow behind you. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, very much so. Which is it's a difficult concept, especially as like younger entrepreneurs, when you were the doer for so long of I'll outwork everybody. I'll work 12, 14, 18-hour days. I'll do it 364 days a year. Because I do think that just grit and work ethic is part of why a lot of young entrepreneurs or new entrepreneurs are successful is that they really will just work 80 hours and it doesn't occur to them that maybe that's not normal because they don't want normal lives, so they don't mind.
Right.
But that shift, for me psychologically was really difficult. And frankly, probably took me about 3 years to start to roll my head around, those days where you come home and it was all of those big proactive, the big idea days, the big, hey, I had a conversation with somebody that took 3.5 hours, but they really understand what our organization's about and they trust us. You go home and you compare that day to a day 5 years earlier where like, oh, I worked 12 hours a day, but I got 92 tasks done. And on that day, you're like, what did you do? I was like, well, I kind of talked all day. And I read this article that took 45 minutes to understand and listened to this podcast and then had this really great conversation with another business guy. And you go home and you're like, I know I made progress, but I can't show it to you. And that was probably about a 3 year period for me to realize that to that John Maxwell point, like you can't define growth that you don't understand. You just have to grow and trust that it becomes valuable in some way.
Wow. Yeah, that's what an interesting concept. I mean, it's a very high level. I mean, we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? As you're growing up in the personal world, the business world, you're not going to become greater than you are. But so many entrepreneurs do get. I mean, what gets them to success is, like you said, the 80-hour-a-week grind, and they sacrifice family, balance, their
Mm-hmm.
faith, whatever, many times, a lot of things, their health, and they don't know how to peel out of that because that's all they've known. They've identified, right? They've self-identified. This is what I do is who I am, right? And
Yeah.
I and I
Right.
and I get the feeling that you're not identifying with what you do, your business. That's just something you
Yeah.
do, but that's not who Jonathan is.
Right. Which is, I definitely wasn't always that way. Especially in those like survival years at the beginning where it's this thing will work or we will all starve to death. Like those years, it's hard to separate those. And so I think people
Yeah.
do need to give themselves a lot of grace. But if you're successful and have been successful for a while and you still identify first as, whatever your profession is, even if it's I'm an entrepreneur or I'm a business person or
Mm.
whatever, I always joke that if anybody talks about real estate at my funeral, I will get out of the casket and fight them because I like very much don't want my life to be defined by the way I make money. Now, if they wanted to talk about the organization, what the organization meant, what the community meant,
Mm.
what the impact outside of the business was, then I would be okay with that. But
Mhm.
if somebody talks about my sales, like I will come back from the dead. So
I will haunt you.
yeah, exactly.
So, well, how does it? I mean, this is common though. I mean, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
common for someone who reaches that level of success. They ground it out. You hear about it all the time. They're the ultimate technician. They're in their business. Identify with it. It's hard to delegate because I'm the best at it. I got to do it.
Yep.
How did you said 3 years? Was there a framework, or was it through association, or I mean, how did you escape that gravitational pull and kind of start getting yourself out there?
I think it's and it depends on your success level. Mentors are priceless. At certain success levels, it's sometimes hard to find mentors. That's where I think like peers are really priceless, and not peers that like the kind of peers that will actually tell you the truth and challenge you. The kind of peers that are as successful as you are or more, who will just immediately tell you that hey, I don't think that's a good idea, or hey, I think your value set's off, or hey, you always said you believe this thing and you're doing this thing that doesn't seem in line with it. Those are really good. For me, it was watching people that were more successful than I was and really trying to be a student of them and realizing most of the people that had success in a way that I desired were making different decisions. They never talked about tasks. They never talked about how hard they worked. They were getting up early and taking care of their bodies way before they were at the office, which seemed, to me for a long time seemed like a luxury, or almost seemed like I hate to say laziness because it's sort of counterintuitive, but I have some really good mentors that never got into the office before 10:30. Now they would wake up at 5 and they would read and study and go to the gym and see their kids and, all that kind of stuff. They're not walking in the office till 10:30. And I'm thinking, I've been working for 4 hours by the time you're even getting to work. Like, come on, man, like do better. And now I realize like, no, it's this sort of, blue sky concept of they're going to go out and make themselves as valuable as possible first, and then go back into the organization and bring the value there. And some of that is just basic, physical fitness leads to mental clarity, which leads to better decisions. And if you don't have the faith to believe that you're going to make better decisions, it's one of those things that there's a humility aspect to realize like I can always be better. That if I was 10% smarter, 10% more well read, or 10% better networked, or 10% just more rested and at peace, or 10% happier, what would that mean inside the organization? Because when you look at like where there's a lot of missteps, it's usually coming in those areas that you're fatigued, that you got short with somebody, that you sent an email that probably shouldn't have been sent, that if you're in a better, frame, or you're trying to land, like there's a positive side to it too. Like you're trying to land a big sell, you're in a contract negotiation, you're trying to recruit, key hire. Those moments where you're like the happiest, most fun, best version of yourself, like that 1% is the difference between, your next CEO working for you or not. And you have to reverse engineer that to say like, okay, hey, me being that 1% happier on this one random Wednesday and in October means that in July I need to be eating right and exercising, and that I need to be taking vacations, and that I need to be well rested, because I'm training for that one moment. And just realizing like, it's very similar to watching very high level athletes and what they do all year for 12, 16 games a year depending on the sport, and putting yourself in that same, value yourself as much as they value themselves.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, so it's really I was reading a book by an athlete. I forget the name of the book right now. Maybe I can find it later and reference it. But he was talking about he, the fact that he was a professional athlete. I think it was Russell Wilson who was speaking to this. Made the choices in his life. It reduced the amount of choices in his life in terms of what he could do in a day-to-day basis, right? So he did not have the choice not to exercise today. He did not have the choice to go out and stay to 2 3 a.m. and party with all his friends. That was not a choice that he could even was even on the radar, because of the decision he had sort of pre-made that I want to be successful. I want to, if I'm going to operate at this level as a professional athlete, I have to be in tip-top shape. I have to, there's only so many choices I can make in life. I don't have freedom to do anything or everything I want to do,
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like the world says. And so that made it, in his mind, a little easier to execute day to day, um, in terms of, how he lived his life.
Yeah, I think that's that realizing that we have capacity, and then accepting it, and realizing like if things want to change, I'm making room for them somewhere. We live in, such a odd culture where like entrepreneurs are sort of the new, rock stars or whatever. And so if you turn on any social media, there's a bunch of guys, telling you how they went from 0 to 30 million in 12
Yeah.
months, and you could do this and you could do that. And in Mike's, and good for them. Like if you're one of those people, do it. Russell Wilson's Russell Wilson, and I'm not. Like there's something there
Right.
way beyond work ethic that like not taking from any of those people, including a business, that those people that can start, a $0 to $30 million business, good for you. I'm not one of those guys. I'm very aware of that. And I, we have this training that we just a little bit of an exercise that we do with some of the agents. And what we'll do is we'll kind of go through, and you can do the categories however you want to do the categories, but like faith, fitness, family, fun, your financial stuff. And you go through, have everybody give themselves like a 0 to 10 rating. The only rule on it is that you can't give a 7, because seven's a cop out. And so you got to be an 8 or a 6 pick. And then what we do is they then take that number across however many categories, and they average it out. And so you say like, okay, look, I'm going to be, it's real. I think it's realistic for someone that is successful to say, hey, I'm going to be 10% better this year, 5% better this year, depending on the more successful you get, that percentage should go down a lot, because you're already doing so many things well. The idea that you're going to turn an aircraft carrier on a dime is just flawed. So it's, hey, we're going to turn it by degrees, and at the end of the year, maybe it'll be 5% difference, or it'll be 10% different. And so you kind of go back to those categories and you say, hey, look, I was a 6 in fun. Like I'm just, I'm not unhappy, but I would not say that my life is giving me the energy that when I show up at work, I'm so happy because of what I did yesterday, right?
Mm.
And so, okay, cool. I want to go from a 6 to an 8 in the happiness scale. I'm going to hold the line on almost everything else because 10%, say my 10% growth in a year is, if it was 40 points total, 10% growth would be 4. So I'm really only moving 4 points across the entire spectrum of my life this
Mm-hmm.
calendar year, 2 of which is going to be in happiness. So that, you see how people make like the New Year's resolutions, like I'm going to lose 10 pounds. I'm going to wake up earlier. I'm going to read my Bible every day. I'm going
Yeah.
to take my wife out on a date, every week. You're like, well, you're not. I mean, unless if you're terrible at all those things, if you're 3 across the board, yeah, you could probably move everything up to a 5 in a year.
Right.
But most people that are doing those kind of exercises are not those people. They've got it together. They're already doing a handful of things really well.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens is they try and pick a brand new habit. They fall, they see especially those things that are not urgent, but they're vital. Talk to your wife a little bit less because like, but I'm making more money. Or don't see the kids, miss a few dinners at night. But hey, look, it's having a really great client meetings. Or I was going to the gym. I'm going to go to the gym after work, but that means I'm missing dinner. Like, don't do that. Like, let's just, instead of trying to do giant swings, let's just be 2 points better and just
Mm-hmm.
consider that realistic progress. And then do that same exercise again, at the end of the year, and then try and make the same progress somewhere else, but hold the line in happiness. Keep that habit, like let it bake in, let it settle. And I think, that sense of patience and that sense of like a realistic acceptance of human limitations creates a sense of peace that you're not failing, and if you are winning, then your confidence goes up, your self satisfaction goes up. That you can look at it and say, like, you know what, I didn't grow my business 30% year over year over year over year, but I grew it 10% every year for the last 3 years, and I'm not swinging the way everybody else is swinging because I'm doing consistent, steady things. So that's always been my philosophy on it.
Well, that's great. I mean, incremental improvement, marginal improvement. If you can focus in an area, I mean, I think we have today as a society is we have we've lost the ability to focus in an area. We've got social media. There's always been a challenge with sort of comparing yourself to other people and whatnot. And clearly, you're pretty grounded there in terms of knowing yourself, which I think is maybe one of the hardest things we do, right?
Mm.
But if you can understand yourself and understand your weaknesses and your strengths and not, as you said, try to attack everything at one point, then you can make some genuine progress in your life and be happy about it, right? And feel good. And I
Yeah,
think that's what you're saying.
yeah, definitely. So, and I think too, like, you know the defining happiness for yourself and not letting other people determine what
Mm-hmm.
success looks like for you or what happiness looks like for you is really, really hard to do. And that inherently takes some large amount of self confidence to sort of just, resist all of culture to say, like, oh, hey, I don't work on Sundays, or I don't get on social media. We've got a guy here that I love this, and I'm not going to steal it because I don't have the discipline. But what he does is I believe it's the last week of every month, he deletes all social media from his phone. And so he makes like a goodbye post every week just to say, like, hey, if you need me, you have to call or text me, but I'm
Right.
off of everything. And this is a guy that's in sales. He's really visible. He's a high level salesman that does social media to drive his business. And
Right.
that guy is choosing to take 25% of the time, 25% of his exposure, and just turn it off
Yeah.
because it's coming at some expense to something else he values. And there's some amount of self-confidence to say, like, you know what, I'm going to live my life by design.
Yes.
And maybe I'm
Yes.
wrong. Maybe 3 years from now it was a mistake and I lost the money and it's created other stress. Maybe he's wrong, but he doesn't. I don't think he cares. He wasn't asking permission. He's saying, "Hey, this is the way I'm going to live my life by design."
Well, yeah, what if he was wrong? So what, right? I mean, in
Right?
terms of you're pushing your the fact that he is, he's making that decision. This is who I am. This is who I want to be, regardless of what anyone, no
Right?
one else is going to define me. And I may be an abysmal failure, but at least he'll learn from that, right? He's falling forward. He's moving towards
Exactly.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And his confidence level will be higher
Yeah.
because he knows himself better at the end of whatever time period it is. He'll understand if he's even mildly a student of it. He'll understand why it was wrong, and he can go back and say, "Here's the intent behind it. The execution was just off," and he can reiterate it. Which is, I mean, you've been doing this a long time. That's all business is. is, hey, we had a great idea. It was 80% right. It was 20% wrong. That's if either one of us, if somebody sent us a business plan, you're like, hey, this will work 80% of the time.
Yeah.
Both of us would buy the business, start the business, do whatever right then. That's
Yep.
more than what you need. And everything is broken 20% of the time, including Google, the federal government, anything. Like everything is broken 20% of the time. You just are used to it.
Yeah.
And when it's your thing that's broken, you're super self-aware and you think, oh my gosh, everybody can look at it. Everybody can see the flaws in this, or, everybody's, a little bit overweight. Everybody's a little bit out of shape. Not everybody runs a mile as fast as they want to run a mile. Everybody wishes they had a little bit more money. Nobody's thinking of you. Nobody cares. Everybody's paying attention to their own thing. 80% of good plans, good enough. Like just be comfortable with it. And again, it's that sense of autonomy that more than I value what anybody else thinks, I value them living my life on purpose. Because
Oh,
why would I value the opinion of people that aren't even thinking of me more than I value my own decision to live?
man. Yeah, that's profound. It is true. So many of us lived wrapped around the axle of what everyone else thinks at our own expense, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
We used to go to that wasn't something I came up with. That was something I learned. We got really heavily into CrossFit for quite a while there.
Mm.
And every time we would bring a new person, and I was this way at the beginning too, you show up to a CrossFit class where it's very, very hard. The movements are somewhat technical. You're going to be bad at it for a long time. And you go in there and you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing my double unders right, or I can't do as many pull-ups as the guy beside me. I'm doing 6 pull-ups and he's doing 9 or 12. And then after you do that for long enough, you realize I have no idea what anybody around me was doing. I was trying not to die every single one of those classes that we went to. And you realize, like, when you're focused on what you're doing, one, your world gets really, really small and you become focused on yourself, which is beautiful. And then two, you realize everybody else is doing the same thing. Nobody has a
Mm.
clue that I wore the wrong socks to the gym that day, that they're mismatched, or that, I did 30% less pull ups than the guy beside me. Nobody was ever paying attention because they're all worried that everybody's paying attention to them. And it was just this very liberating feeling to be like, dude, nobody's paying attention to you. Nothing matters. And then all of a sudden you just went in there and it took so much of the pressure off. And then we would bring people and you would watch them sort of go through that same
Same,
learning
same.
curve of, oh my gosh, did you see when I did that thing? I didn't do very good. I was like, no, I had no idea. I was trying not to vomit. And it was such a liberating feeling. And then you realize, like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, work is like this. The big difference being that, social media skews it. That if you go to CrossFit right now on Instagram, you're going to think that's what CrossFitters look like. And it's
Yeah.
not true. If you go in any CrossFit gym, I mean, they're fit people, but there's a bunch of normal people in there. There's a bunch of old dads in there. There's a bunch of old moms in there. There's a bunch of little kids in there. There's little skinny guys, little skinny girls, like giant humans, tiny human. It's a much more normal sampling. But social media will make you think, oh my gosh, they all have, 18 packs and can do a million
Yeah.
push-ups. And you just
Oh,
can't look at that kind of stuff because it's just not real.
no. Somebody I was talking to last week called that the white noise that hides the signal of your life. It's all that junk
Mm,
out there. And
yeah.
social media is a big part of that. And it's just a real funny story as we wrap. It's hard to believe we've been over 30 minutes already.
Oh
But
gosh.
I was at the gym last week and I was doing the little sled where you push the sled and I had my running shoes on and I was halfway across the floor and I could feel my shoe getting really loose. And all of a sudden, my right shoe pops off, then my left shoe pops off, and I flip over and fall on my back, and I'm just laughing. I look around, I think everybody's laughing at me, and I look around, and I don't think anyone even noticed in the
Yeah.
middle of the gym.
Yep.
It's like, this is a comical moment, They're all going to laugh with me, at me, whatever. Nobody noticed, nobody cared.
Yeah.
They were doing their
Yeah.
thing.
And think about like how terrifying it is. There's all these decisions that we might make that might make our lives better that we don't because we're afraid that people might be laughing at us or with us. And no one was ever thinking of us. And so we lived a smaller life because we were afraid somebody was paying attention and none of them ever were.
Wow. Wow. Hey, with that, Jonathan, that is awesome. Awesome. It's advice, not directly advice, but it's advice. I normally ask what advice would you give people, aspiring entrepreneurs and business people, but there's so much packed into this. This is
Yeah.
amazing.
Thanks, man.
Well, look,
It's a good time.
yeah, no, thank you for being on. We need to do this again in the future and tell everyone how they can get in contact with you if maybe they're an up and coming real estate agent or
Yeah.
entrepreneur, and maybe they're looking, hey, I'd like to join a brokerage that really believes in community and mentorship and a lot of the awesome things you guys are doing. How do they get in contact with you?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be a total hypocrite here. Social media. It's the easiest and fastest way to find us. Facebook, Instagram. You can find me on Jonathan Melvin. If you go to Own Real Estate Virginia, we'll pop up on all of those. We're pretty active on there. So just shoot us a message.
Awesome, awesome, Jonathan. Thanks again for being on. This is awesome, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you. This is a good time. We'll do it again soon.
Yes.